Hello and welcome to my craft channel, Susie Mates. This is a series of crochet videos I've been taking you through from the very beginning, as the very first one was about making your first slip knot, your working chain on your hook. The next one was about how to make crochet chains, then how to turn those chains into a ring, and then how to crochet a treble stitch. And from there we completed several rows, 4 rows of treble stitches, which completed your granny square. So today's video is about joining your granny squares. Now, I hear a lot that people think that there is no right side or wrong side to granny squares. To me there is a subtle difference. To me that is the right side and that is the wrong side. Not much of a difference, I'll grant you, but there is, to me, some. And also, the right side just tends to ever so slightly curl towards you. So that, anyway, you pick up the two together, wrong sides together. I'm only going to show you one way of joining granny squares in this video. I will do future videos showing you 1 or 2 others. As with all things in crochet, there is more than one way to do something, and I believe personally that this is the easiest way to join your granny squares. And for the purposes of this video I'm going to use red so that it will make it nice and clear to see what I'm doing. So we're going to crochet a line of double crochets across both of the granny squares. Now the very first one we actually work into the corner of the front granny square and the back granny square. Then we will work into the tops of the stitches, the chains that sit on top of the stitches. So to start with, we've made our slip knot on our hook. We put the hook into the first corner and into its opposite corner on the square behind. And actually, just show you that a bit more clearly, we've gone into the first corner space there and on the one behind. So wrong sides together. You put your hook into the first corner space and then into the second corner space. You put your yarn around your hook and pull it through so you have 2 stitches, which is all you require for double crochet. 2 equals double. So you put your yarn around the hook and then pull it through. So you're back to the beginning with 1 stitch on your hook and you've completed your first double crochet. Leave that tail for now, just ignore it. They get sewn in much later. Now, as I said before, the rest of the double crochets will be worked through the chains that sit on top of the stitches. So that's the first chain that sits on top of the first treble. Just point that out. So my hook has gone into the first chain that sits on top of this first treble, and it needs to go into the opposite side first chain on top of the first treble. So there you have it. If you're not careful with your counting and say you went across to the second one, instead you'll find that you've got uneven lengths of granny square by the time you get to the end. So the hook goes into the chain that sits on top of the first treble on the front square and exactly the same on the back square. You put your yarn over the hook, pull it through so you have your 2 stitches. To complete, yarn over, pull through, back to the beginning with your 1 stitch, your working loop on your hook. And there you can see you've done your second double crochet. Now you can work all of them through chains, You don't have to do the corner ones into the corners. The reason I do it is because, as I mentioned before, there's several ways of doing everything in crochet. And normally I prefer to finish off using an invisible chain. And when you use an invisible chain to make your granny squares look nice and neat, instead of pulling the yarn through the last loop to bind it off, which can look slightly knotty or slightly messy, your invisible chain doesn't have that bit of yarn that sits underneath like all the other chains do. So there's nothing to, if you like, to put your hook into. It just sits underneath those, the chain, the invisible chain. So I always work my corners into the corners, and then the rest of my double crochets I always work into the chains that sit on top of the trebles. So we've done 2. Here's our next one. Into its opposite number on the back. Yarn over your hook, pull through, yarn over your hook, pull through, back to the beginning. You see you're getting your little double crochets forming there. Now for this last treble cluster, we go through the next 2 chains, through its opposite on the back, there. Now you should have 4 double crochets. Let's just take my hook out a moment so I can show you what's going on here. There. You see how that lays nice and flat? With this join you get a small ridge which actually adds to the pattern of what you're creating, whether it's a cushion or a blanket, and that you just complete that all the way along. Now, because we've done the first 3 trebles, so the first treble cluster, we're now in this gappy bit. You remember we did chain 1s to make that gappy bit, so there is still a proper chain there for you to put your hook into. You will see underneath that you have got that single strand of yarn, so your hook fits exactly the same way as it does with the chains that sit on top of the trebles. So in the gap on the opposite side you put your hook through, so you just do it in the normal way, yarn over hook, pull through, 2 stitches, yarn over hook, pull through, back to the beginning, 1 stitch. Now we're going across the top of these next 3 trebles, or this treble cluster. So one at a time we put our hook through the first one, the first chain on top of the first treble. We find its opposite on the other side. You put your yarn over the hook and pull through for 2 stitches, yarn over to complete. Back to the beginning. The same for number 2. Pick up the chain on the top of the stitch on both sides, yarn over hook, pull through to 2 stitches, yarn over hook, back to beginning. So that's those 2. And to finish off the second treble cluster, excuse me, in exactly the same way. You see how that's forming? Now we're up to the second gap, and you can see that chain and that sitting on top of that yarn there. There it is. So through that chain in the opposite gap, through the same chain, pull through to 2 stitches, pull through back to the beginning, and you just keep doing that. So the next treble cluster, that's your first chain, its opposite one on the back, and you just double crochet to the end. Now there's no reason why you can't use a different colour to join your granny squares if you prefer. It doesn't have to be in the same colour as the final colour used in your last round of granny square. You might think to yourself, well actually I think I'll do them all red, or whatever colour you choose. Now up to the next gap, so it's through the chains that sit across those gaps, on the front and the back, and double crochet. Now we're back to our corner, so we join these first 3 trebles together in the same way as we have been doing. So through the first chain, through the second chain, and again for the second trebles on both sides. And through the third chains. And to finish off, as we started through doing our first double crochet through the first corner. We end that way. So we put our hook into the second corner, and into the corner of its opposite on the back, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. There, you have finished. It's always when you finish and you go to cut your thread, pull your loop a little bit so that it won't unravel too easily. And just, oops, there goes a crochet hook. I forgot to bring my scissors. So let's just break the yarn, which I wouldn't normally do. And to finish off, you take your tail that you've just broken off there, put it through the loop and pull. And there you have a joined granny square. So you've got this, you've got this pretty chain that sits across the top, which nearly all crochet is worked into the chains. And you've got these pretty row of little crochet, double crochets all the way along. And that is how you do it. So if I wanted to put the next one on, I would back to back like I did before and do exactly the same all the way along. And you keep joining them. Now, what I normally do, where I begin, I usually leave that tail till I'm ready to actually join together my blanket or my cushion or whatever I'm making, because then I know I've got, if your crochet tends to fall one way slightly more than it does the other, then I know mine's all going to be going in the same direction. The second tail, where I ended, I actually thread it up. And with all crochet stitches you have a front and a back, so you run your needle through the middle for a few stitches. And give it a pull so that it doesn't unravel at some later stage. And I forgot my scissors, but I would then just snip that off. So I shouldn't really do this, but don't copy me, you just snip yours off. There you are. There's still a little tail there, but I'll snip that later. There, and you have a joined granny square. Now you can pull them about a bit so that they all look nice and even and comfy together sitting there. Now once you've got, what I would suggest is that you always put, so your crochet your granny squares together in rows. So you put that one there and that one there, and then when you've done that, as many as you want in a row, say you want to make a cushion cover, so you've got you want a 4x4 cushion cover, so, and you've crocheted along these, then you would do exactly the same with a second row. So crochet another 4, and then you would pick those up. Let's just pretend that these are have been double crocheted down here. You'd pick your 2 lines up and then crochet the 2 rows together all the way along from beginning to end, in exactly the same way as I've just shown you. So you do them one by one first, and then your next row, and then you crochet the 2 rows together. So we pretend I've got another 4 here. There's 2. So you would then crochet from this end right the way through to this end in exactly the same way, doing your double crochets, starting and finishing off in exactly the same way. So there you have how to join your granny squares using the double crochet method. Call back again and I will show you a different way to join your granny squares. Thank you for stopping by.